The Imitation Game, correct? The Imitation
The
Game.
Imitation Game, yeah.
Good evening. Tonight we have another episode of Meet the Author. Tonight we have the author of the book, A Schoolboy's War. It's a memoir about a schoolboy that lived through the Blitz, the war, and the Second World War in England and London. And he has a first-person history of a young boy in England during World War II. Derek Couturas takes you with him, beside him, as bombs fall and families and lives are being torn apart. Another one says, Derek Couturas whisked me away and regaled me with his poignant memories, his understandable fears, and his enthralling adventures as he watched history unravel before him. A memoir. Thank you, Derek, for being on the show.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me, and I'm just dying to tell you about all my experiences during World War II and to introduce everybody to my book. Thank you, Jason.
And I mentioned to you on the same day that we met and we talked about this book originally. By coincidence, I had gone to the movie, The Imposter Game, and it was about the Enigma, and which brought back pictures of the Blitz, and it was like a coincidence that should happen. So the Blitz is now back in the news, you can say. But one of the questions I had for you, I mean, we already had the Battle of Britain, a couple versions of it already. Why, after all these years, and this is a very interesting story, did you decide now to write your memoir about your life during the Blitz in London?
Well, Jason, World War II, stories of World War II never go away. And I was in or under World War II, and my family, my kids asked me, what happened? What did you do in the war, Dad? And I would come up with stories, and they were entranced. So eventually they said to me, why don't you write a book? And as I watched TV, I would see kids on TV in Sarajevo, for instance. They'd be playing soccer in the streets while shells were coming down, and that reminded me of my own experience. And again, in Syria, the Syrian refugees, you'd see families that were absolutely terrorized, but in the background you could see the kids still playing in their innocence. They didn't really know what was going to happen, and that reminded me of my own experience. So I wrote a book. And you wrote a book.
Now, I have to correct myself. It wasn't exactly London. Which town were you from again? More closer to the shore.
Yes, Southampton, which is opposite. It's a port city. It's opposite the shores of France.
And that was a major staging point during D-Day.
That's right. Yeah.
So it also brought you close to the war.
It was a huge port, and they could export many soldiers from that port.
So in reality, your book is not just about the Blitz, it's also about D-Day, which we'll get to talk about in a moment. Now, you talk about being a child in wartime, and you mention yourself a very interesting story in the book about, which I found amazing, when you talked about you were playing soccer by your school, and they would take away the goalposts, and that was a very interesting story for a children's version of how to get by in a war. Can you relate that story?
Oh yes, we had a sports field like every school does, a soccer pitch, and one day during class we looked out the window and the soccer posts were being taken down, and we said to the teacher, why? She said, because planes may need to crash land on there. And sure enough, the following day during a math class, a plane came in and belly landed, and we had the excitement of watching the pilot get out of the plane, we all ran outside and crowded round, and then after that, more planes crashed. One landed out of fuel, and the pilot got out. He had lunch with the teachers in the common room, and
well, we have immigration issues today, so that's one way to immigrate without a visa.
right.
That's pretty cool. Now, you brought some pictures with you. You want to show us some of the pictures? And then we also have a poster which was shown away. These are memorable pictures for you. Okay, let me hold that for you.
This is D-Day, just after the landing. I wasn't on that side of the channel, the English channel, but that's the American soldiers going in. They took terrible casualties, but these guys look pretty relaxed. But that was just after their landing.
And you told me some interesting stories about D-Day because you witnessed when the soldiers actually went onto the landing barges and the ships to go to Normandy. So you said something very interesting. You had a funny experience. You said they're going to war and it's raining money.
Oh, yeah.
What was the expression again?
Yeah, got up one morning and D-Day was on. Trucks were pouring down to the port, loaded with soldiers, and they were taking their English money and throwing them to us kids on our way to school. It was raining money.
Because they knew they weren't coming back directly to England.
Yeah, they'd been issued French francs, and they didn't need the... So it was great. We scrambled. The nuns at the seminary told the kids, that's a gift from God, give it to us, but we held on to our money. Yeah.
Oh, that's cute. So here we have a tank.
A tank, yeah. I had an experience with a tank just like that. On the way home from school, my friends and I came across a tank like that. We were quite thrilled. We climbed on it. There's nobody around. We climbed on it, and we sat in the in the driving seat. And one young man said, "I know how to drive it," and we dared him to show us how to drive it, and he did, and immediately crashed it through a wall. So that.
So they drafted him.
Yeah, he was on. Yeah,
he was on.
Yeah.
Now you also told a very interesting story. I have some pictures of the Blitz. We'll get to that interesting story. We don't have the picture here. I'll hold that up for everybody. But while we're showing that, you mentioned the story of. Make sure I got that for everyone to see. There was a big crater. The bomb, like I didn't realize, and we saw in another picture, how large the bomb craters were. So what was the tonnage of the bombs that landed?
Oh, I'm not sure. Probably they're probably 500 pounders. Yeah,
500 pounders,
yeah.
And it was these gigantic craters. And what happened with the soldier in the crater?
Craters. So it rains a lot in England, as everybody knows. The crater's filled with water. And my friends and I were going by, and we heard a lot of noise going on in one of these craters. So we went and looked. There was an American soldier swimming around the crater, and there was an empty bottle floating beside him, and he kept shouting at us in what we thought was a strange language. It was actually Italian, and so we got a big branch and lowered it down to him. And we all hauled on the branch trying to pull him out, and we got him nearly to the top, and then we couldn't hold him anymore, and we let go, and he went back down into the water. So we had to go and get the army to finally get him out. That was.
So some of the stories are funny.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of funny stories, but it was not all gloom and dooms. Funny things happen. Some things were quite terrible. I always hated the air raid shelters at school. There was no light. We had to go underground, and we were crammed in there. And some kids were claustrophobic, and they'd go absolutely nuts. But they couldn't get out. So I didn't like the shelters at all.
And we'll talk about that in a second. So because I have the poster up, so do you have something here you wanted to talk about on this poster here? You want to point out? These are clippings you saved from at the time of the war from the newspapers.
Right. Here's, let me see. There was pictures of the Blitz, the devastation, and there was plenty of that. For instance, here at Blitz Church, that was when we finally broke the blockade, the U-boat blockade across the Atlantic, and we started getting luxuries like candy now and again.
Huh.
And yeah, various things like that. Land girls that were sent to work on the land, they had no choice but to go and dig turnips. Yeah, soldiers they were embarking for D-Day. It was more soldiers embarking here.
That one.
It was a very tumultuous time.
But it was interesting how you mentioned when the blockade was lifted, so you were able to get candy. So again, this story is about a schoolboy's war, a schoolboy's perspective. I mean, what's important, how is the war affecting the children? And you talked about other things that affected the children. And what really, on some of the pictures you showed me, was the evacuation. I didn't realize that. I thought everybody just went down to the shelters. I didn't realize they were evacuated. Can you talk a little bit about the evacuation?
Scores, hundreds of thousands of children were evacuated. I was told that I was going to be evacuated to Canada, which, you know, I wasn't too sure about that, but I was told, oh, you'll live in the mountains, there'll be all kinds of fun to be had there.
Were people evacuated to Canada?
Oh, yeah, many, great
Really?
many.
Did they stay there or they all came back?
They came back, but they were there for years and they got used to a different lifestyle. So readapting back in, you know, with their parents was very difficult for them. A friend of mine was put on a boat. He was going to Canada, to Halifax.
Mm-hmm. I had been there. I had been to Halifax.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Nova Scotia.
And he was. The boat was torpedoed while they were still in the Irish Sea, and a lot of kids lost their lives. But he was lucky. He got taken off on a destroyer and brought back to the port of Liverpool, still in his pajamas because they were all in bed when the boat got hit.
Actually, in the Imitation Game in the movie, they had a lot of episodes about the torpedoing of the supply ships coming back and forth from the States to England and so forth with wolf packs.
Right.
That was a big issue in the movie itself. And I guess that they were using the Enigma machine to notify the U-boats. Can you read a passage from your book? We got a couple passages ready for us.
Oh, sure.
And we'll show these pictures a little bit later.
Okay. I was on a train. We went through London, and it was devastated. We were going north to get away from we thought that we were expecting a German invasion. And my mother, myself, and my baby sister were on this train, and we were approaching the city of York, and we could see ahead when we went round a curve the city was being, the downtown area was being shot up and bombed. So
at the time, you actually see the bombing, or the ball was already
we were
bombed?
heading right into it.
Oh,
So,
wow.
The conductor returned, forcing his way back through our car, again repeating his urgent message. Next stop, 60 seconds, only 60 seconds. Our train arrived at the station platform with the brakes full on, which unbalanced the standing passengers, throwing them into disarray. The station roof was burning fiercely. In the streets beyond, bombs were exploding on nearby buildings. A formation of fighters bearing the round insignia of the Royal Air Force burst through the black smoke, their wing cannons spitting fire as they swept across the rooftops. Frantic people blocked both doorways, struggling to get off the train. The lady who had been conversing with my mother hesitated at the back of the mob. "Stay on," urged my mother, her voice full with anxiety. "We'll be getting out of here any second." The lady hesitated and then, deciding, turned and plunged through the door with the rest of the exiting passengers, heading for the air raid shelter. Mouth agape, I watched through the window. Clutching her purse, the lady ran at the heels of the pack. Before she had gone half a dozen strides, she fell, sprawling on the hard concrete. A hurrying railroad porter paused and lifted her, dragging her down the shelter steps to safety. I flinched as burning debris crashed onto the roof of our train. "Get down!" screamed my mother. She was lying on the floor, shielding my wailing sister with her body. Our soldier hauled me off the seat and lay on top of me, my nose filled with the smell of his serge uniform and the oil from his rifle. The train lurched and went into motion. From beneath the soldier, I could see people's feet as they leapt from the train. I twisted my neck and peered upward through the window. An anti-aircraft gun mounted on a railroad truck came into view, opening fire as our car drew abreast of it. The deafening noise burst upon our ears, prompting my sister to scream at the top of her tiny lungs. And then it was gone, the percussions fading as we gained speed, leaving the station behind. The open doors swung aimlessly, allowing a cold rush of air into the car. The soldier raised himself and looked out of the window. My mother soothed my sister, at the same time admonishing me, "Stay down." Our train raced through the city outskirts, putting distance between us and the center of attack. That was one train ride I took that was under attack, and later on the return journey, we were attacked again. So
wow,
it was a very
going and coming.
it was a very exciting ride.
So that was very interesting. So now you had also a photo. Let's put this for the other place that you're going to read. Mm-hmm. You had a photo here. Why was this important? Well, here we have a picture of Eisenhower talking to the band of brothers. Why was this photo important for you?
In the forest around us, we took refuge on my grandparents' farm just outside the city limits. There's a lot of forest. So when the Americans came in 1942, they went into the forest, they put up these camouflage tents, and they lived underneath the trees so that the German Air Force couldn't identify them and more or less work out the force that was massing on the south coast for D-Day. And that was a picture of the paratroopers that went in on D-Day. And D-Day was a tremendous thing. There was convoys going down to the port. They were just moving at a walking pace. There were so many soldiers crammed in all the trucks. And a friend of mine, an American soldier that I had befriended and got to know very well, he left with them. So I got out of school that day and I went to find him. His name was Stanley, and he'd gone. And his whole camp was empty, and I wandered through the camp hoping to see Stanley, but they were all gone. So I got on my bicycle and rode along the lines of trucks looking for his face. Eventually I got down to the port, and I got on the docks and went from dock to dock hoping to see him. But and the MPs kept chasing me away, but I kept hiding and coming back. But they were loading them onto LCTs, landing craft, ready for the assault. And I didn't see Stanley. I went home, told my mother about it. She said, "Don't go down there anymore, it's dangerous." But the next day, I got on my bicycle, went down to the port. Then they were bringing the wounded back, and these LCTs were coming up on the beach, and the ambulances were lining up, and the stretcher bearers were carrying them ashore. And I kept trying to look at their faces and see if I could see Stanley, but I never did see him. I don't know if he perished on the beaches or survived. And
you didn't have his last name?
No, he lived in... I had a lot of conversations with him because he used to stand guard, and he'd be fully armed. I thought he was a tremendous warrior. He had his carbine and his bayonet on his hip and all his ammunition, and he talked to us in the American vernacular. He'd say, "Hi, you playing hooky from school?" We thought that was so funny. We'd never heard anyone say you playing hooky from school. So we talked. We said, "Where are you from? Do you live in a skyscraper?" We'd seen pictures of the Empire State Building being built.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, no, I live in an apartment with my mother and father. Not everybody lives in a skyscraper in New York. So, yeah, I miss Stanley. I never saw him.
What town did he come from?
New York City.
New York City. Well,
Yeah.
it's going to be hard to look up the name Stanley in New York City. But maybe he's watching this show,
Maybe he is.
and he'll give you a call.
Yeah, you never know.
So let's read one more. You have one more part you wanted to read?
Yeah.
Sure. I'll take that paper.
Something very funny things happened right in amongst all the carnage. My mother and my sister and I, we heard that a large store in the city had got a big intake of food, dry goods, and the rationing situation was very acute at that time. So we got on a bus and went down there, and the line stretched around the building like 3 times, people lining up. And my sister and I played on the sidewalk while my mother was lining up. And my mother brought a little umbrella, and my sister took it and played with it, and then I took my turn and played with it, twirling it around. Eventually we went back to the bus stop to get on the train, and I had to carry the food, and my mother carried the food, and my sister carried the umbrella. And I said she should carry some of it because I want to play with the umbrella. And my mother said, "Be quiet, I don't want to hear any more about that umbrella." And my sister put it in her mouth like this. She hooked it in like that and went like that to me. Well, at that moment, the gun started firing, and a bomb came down just a block away. Wow. And she jammed she jumped and jammed the umbrella.
Oh boy, did she lose a tooth?
She couldn't speak. Her jaws were
Stuck.
And I kept saying to my mother, she's eating the umbrella. She's eating the umbrella. And my mother said, "Be quiet. I don't want to hear about that. Where's that bus? We're going to die here." Eventually the bus came and she pushed us on there. And then she realized my sister was still...
The bell was still in her mouth.
So that was, a funny
Things
event.
happen.
My sister doesn't like that story, but I find it very funny.
So we're going to end pretty soon. So looking back now, you wrote this fantastic book, and what would be, now you wrote it also, you said, because you saw what was happening to other children. Unfortunately, we still have wars,
Oh, yes.
So what lesson did you learn, or something you can share with other children that are unfortunately in tough situations now? What's your message for them? What can you teach them?
Well, the ebullience and the fun and the energy that is built into a child never goes away, even though terrible things are happening. Children still play. They're down, but they bounce right back up again. And we should try to foster that as much as possible, because in life there are many downs. And you have to, if you learn as a child that you can bounce back and keep going, that's a good lesson to get you through your life.
Excellent. And would you like to read one more part? Do you have another part you'd like to read?
Right.
Just even a couple lines.
We went to visit my aunt and uncle in London. We thought that maybe my mother thought it would be all right, but it was a wrong move because London was really getting hit. They were being hit with doodlebugs. I don't know if everybody knows what a doodlebug is, but it's a flying bomb. It's an aircraft loaded with explosive, and the Germans would fire it from France to London, and it would just come over London. The engine
like
would
the
shut off.
V8?
You think
Not the V8, the
V2 was
V2.
the next to it. This was
So
a
that came before the V2? I said
the
V8.
V1 and then
That's funny.
the V2. And yeah, it's all about V's. Not much victory, right? a raid started, and my mother came into the bedroom that my sister and I were sleeping in, and she dragged my sister under the bed, and then my aunt came along and dragged me under the bed, and we could hear this doodlebug. It was droning across the city nearby, and my aunt said, let's see. There's another, my aunt gasped. I could hear a faint, eerie wail above the noise of the mayhem in the street. She twisted her head away from me, speaking in the direction of my mother. When you can hear them, it's all right, she said. That means they're flying, but when the noise stops, they're coming down. There was no reply, but I could hear my mother crooning, trying to settle my sister. The wail continued for a moment and then stopped. My aunt's arm tightened around me. Cover your ears, she said, her voice taut. I clamped my hands against my ears, shutting out the sounds from the street. There was a pause, and then a soul-rending explosion. A second blast followed immediately. The house shook, rattling the windows. I felt the wetness of drool running down my chin and tried not to retch. Beyond my muted ears, I could hear my Aunt Molly say shakily, "It'll be all right now, it'll be all right now." Shouldn't we go to the public air raid shelter, Mother asked. There's too much going on out there. Besides, I'm afraid of the shelter. It's claustrophobic, and I'm scared of getting buried alive, came my aunt's reply. Her voice was still shaky. Come into the living room and we'll get under the table. Percy says it's strong enough to hold up the ceiling if it comes down. Hurry! She slid quickly from under the bed, dragging me with her. My mother appeared from the opposite side of the room with Jean in her arms. We piled in beneath a huge, ornate dining table, covering ourselves with eiderdowns taken from the beds. We lay packed close together, listening for more flying bombs, but only hearing the debris rattling down on nearby roofs, the residual fallout of the explosions. That was my first experience with a V1.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, I know you're going to write another book, okay?
Yeah.
Real quick, tell us about that. You already got the bug,
Right.
the jitterbug of writing, being an author. And this is an amazing book, though. That's just for everybody. They can get it on Amazon.com. Where else can they get this?
Barnes & Noble.
Barnes & Noble.
Yeah.
And wherever you're...
Amazon.com, yeah.
And you take offers for signings, right? To
Oh,
come
absolutely,
in and,
yeah.
Okay, that's great. And you also said you were, after the war, you were drafted into the RAF. So you got some RAF stories, too.
After the war came the Cold War, and then everybody got drafted for the Cold War. Which,
So, very quickly, what's your next book going to be about, if you want to say?
it's an escape story. It happens at the outbreak of war in 1939-40, when the Germans were moving into France, and it's about an American woman with her foster son who gets separated from her English husband, and they're trying to get out of France on a little bus, which they commandeered from a local bus route. It was the only way to...
A spy and chase story, as you said, and it has to do with Dunkirk, of course?
Yeah, Dunkirk was happening at the same time.
At the same time.
Embroiled in the...
Just so they have a perspective.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for being a guest on Meet the Author.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much, Jason.
You're welcome.
Enjoyed it very much.